Right. So, any questions from yesterday? I was just chatting with Leah, and we were talking about, you know, my expedition going through the ATM. Now, that's, in a way, that's my opinion about what the ATM is. So you might have a very different experience of what that ATM was for, you know, what it was about, what it was addressing, and that's, you know, that's based on your experience, and that's perfectly fine. So I'm just, you know, you have to take what I say as my opinion, you know, in terms of analysing a lesson. You know, chances are I'm on the right track, I'd like to think, but it's still, I can only do that from my knowledge base, you know, and what other people have told me about their experience. So is that a reasonable qualifying? Yeah. And if you have a different experience of what that lesson is for and what's about, then we can have the juicy discussion about that. And as we do, we sort of redo that process with variations each day. You know, to engage in that is important, and to add in what your experiences are, whether your experiences do match what I have kind of posed as being, you know, a possible you know, raison d'etre for the lesson, you can add in for a bit. Fine. Opinion-based, experience-based. Opinions based on experience, yes, whether that was, yeah. The Carter series. Okay, yeah, I will. So I told you I was going to give you a little window into my process, and it's a dirty, mucky process. Last night, what am I going to tell them? This is a bloody awful series, and I hate it. That's what I was going to tell you. So the Carter series, it's called 5 Winds Carter. And I did find out what the 5 winds meant. Let me just have a look. It's a classic series that's pretty much only taught in training programs because it's hard. It's complicated. And where's my notes for it? I don't have good notes for it, which is part of the problem. Okay. So as I said yesterday, the word kata is a judo term, or it's a martial arts term. It's a Japanese word. So it's across some of the other, I think they use it in Aikido as well. Bruce can tell me, yes, kata, K-A-T-A. And it means form. And so the form in that context is like a pattern of movement, if you like. Literally form is what it means. And in this context, detailed choreographed patterns of movement. And the 5 Winds title of it is from a particular movement of rising up after falling in judo. Found early in judo, so you'd have to write this down, I'm just saying, it's Jutsu no Kata, forms of 5. So when I was doing some more reading about this last night, there is one of these in Alexander Yanai. And Feldenkrais in there talks about where this came from. Just a little brief couple of sentences about that his judo master could do this. He could rise up from lying with this kind of organisation that we will slowly evolve over the 5 days, with no interference of breath or any fighting effort, spike upwards, spike down, which is classic Feldenkrais. I mean, you know, we have to be real. This comes out of judo, you know, this work that we do. So it's that. And if you Google kata, which is what I did, it talks. You know, there are a million katas, but it's scripture for lessons, not lessons, patterns of movement. But this particular one, the 5 Winds kata, is about rising up from the floor. Now we're going down into the floor and coming up into the floor. And there's so let me, this is a bit gabbled, sorry, because this is my process is gabbled when I'm preparing a series like this, especially one that I have a loose intellectual grasp of and very little experiential grasp, right? So Ruth and I did it in our training, I struggled with it, as I said. There was very few, and I'm not bragging. Because I'm flexible, I could do the 18. I certainly didn't learn much from them. Like I was the worst student in the room in that sense, because I could just power through them and do them because I could choose on my flexibility. So I'm not saying this is a brag. I'm actually saying this is a problem for me. Because as I've got older, I've had to go back with it and actually really learn the lesson. And learn my clinical expenses better because it's not my forte. So anyway, so it was a series that I struggled with. There was one other series that I couldn't do. I love teaching now as well. And so, my process for approaching teaching a series like this, which is essentially where you're finding yourself, I wouldn't recommend you teach a series actually if you're going to students anyway. Teach these one-off, beautiful, well-crafted lessons that people have taught and taught and taught, and you can really own them in their singularity. But the way I go around teaching something that I don't know intellectually well and I don't know physically well is it's almost stereotypical actually, and I'm kind of conditioned for this. When I teach in Melbourne, we always stay in the same apartment, so it's like this process always has to be the apartment, like a rat. Anyway. And there's a really interesting phenomenon, I think it's worth sharing, is that I will read through a lesson and my first response, especially when I haven't taught a one like this, is, I don't understand any of that. That is just silly. Now, if you read this, like the first lesson I taught yesterday, it's just the synopsis notes from a training program that Dennis Leary taught. This is his version. Dennis Leary just passed away last year. So he died. Got a friend just saying, stop saying passed away, he just died. He's dead. Sorry? You said I agree? Yeah. So anyway, he was a marvellous person, incredibly intellectual, had a martial arts sort of background, all of the times that made it weak. So, I've got, there's very little to go on, really. And I read it through, I remember reading it through, Zoran sent it to me on Saturday, and I read it through and that's so what I remember, like, just. And that's what my mind does, right? When I experience something that I don't understand, I just do that childish thing of wanting to reject it. I don't understand it. But I decided I do want to do this. So, it's my other self, if you like. This is going to be good for you, Susan. And it would be interesting for the students to have a little window into the sordid nature of your lack of appreciation for some aspects. So, there you go. Now, the interesting thing is, and I read through, and there's 5, right? So we're going to do one each day. And I increasingly quickly read through, got to the 5th, and increasingly didn't understand any of it. It's not understanding can deepen, it deepens. To the point where they were just words, right? Now, the really interesting thing is if you sit with that, and this is what I've learned over the years, you sit with that wanting to reject something because you don't understand it, and you just sit with it. You just let it be, and you don't go into all the emotional stuff of, either, oh, I'm really stupid, I don't understand, or I'm just too clever, I don't understand, and there's something wrong with the script. You just sit with the fact, I don't understand it. You sit with it, and you come back to it. I say I come back to it. And I guarantee every time, the next time I read it, it makes more sense. And then when I read through this Sunday night again to prepare for yesterday, it made perfect sense to me. Now, it's not like I did this massive big study online and reading line by line. And yes, I did get on the floor eventually, but there is just something about trusting your neurology, if you like, and sitting with that not knowing and not understanding, and just quietly coming back to it, Because that's familiar to you, right? Isn't it? That's an ATM. And the other aspect of it is reading the whole 5 was overwhelming. Reading the whole one thing, the whole lesson was overwhelming. So then what do? I just read the first couple of lines and I think, okay, standing, tilting the body forwards from the ankles. Yeah, I get that. So you start from a position of what you do get, and then you build on that. So then I built on the head business. Yeah, I get that. Yep. Okay, sitting down, crossing your legs, being on your hands in the corner. You get all that. See, I'm building on what I know, coming down to your elbow. Yeah, what's the problem? And by the time I just do it bit by bit, I've got to the end of the lesson going, Susan, what the hell was your problem? You know, like why did you have that initial, I don't know. But that's what we do as human beings, right? And that's what we play out every time we do an ATM and every time we do an FI, is that we'll look at somebody on the table, we'll look at our class, we'll look at the lesson on the paper, maybe, and we'll go, I have got no idea. That is overwhelming, right? No, you can't walk away from your class, you can't walk away from your clients. When you're preparing, you can walk away. But in your mind, when you've got the class lying there or the client on the table or standing in front of you, you do mentally walk away just for a moment, come back into yourself. Sit with the discomfort, sit with the not knowing. You don't go into the, oh, you're hopeless, or, oh, no, there's something wrong with them, they're too hard, or, you know, whatever. You just sit with that, I don't know. And then you start with what you do know, because you do know something. And then you build from what you do know. And then you build a little bit more, and you build a little bit more, and you build a little bit more. Now, for me, this not knowing business, I just love that experience of reading it, coming back and starting to, it makes sense more, because it gives me great faith in sort of our unconscious. But once we clear all that emotional response and we come back to it with that more open mind, without all that emotional valence, all that crap, all that self-talk, clarity emerges anyway. Does that make sense? Now, I'm saying that like I'm preaching. That is my honest to God experience. That's what happens every time. How many times do I have to do that? Every time I have to go through that. It gets quicker. This one was harder because like I really don't like this series. But anyway. Yeah, do you want the microphone? No. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. And it's really interesting is that when you're lost, you have to start with what you do know. But you have to know that you're lost first. You just have to know it. Yeah. Sorry? Yes. That's right. You have to know that you're lost first, though. That's really, then you can work from your strength. So don't forget that you have to. Well, yeah, it is, absolutely. And it's, then you could flip out and go into panic mode, that's fine. You can indulge that for 2 seconds. Then you come, okay, what I am. So that process is a beautiful process. It's not a process necessarily unique to Feldenkrais, but if you contemplate, that's what we embody as an experience in ATM. You know, and that's what we're selling to the public, that process of, you know, sitting with being really perturbed and finding the clarity, or finding some way of living with that lack of clarity. With a bit of faith that clarity, you know, nothing, you know, but lack of clarity can't maintain itself. Do you have something else? So that was my process last night. You know, there were swear words. There were, I hurt myself because I forced myself to do something because I just thought that, you know, I'm listening on the next couple of lessons, that's tough. So I used effort, hurt myself, fixed all that up, that's fine. So, you know, maybe this is not a good thing that I'm showing you that I'm actually fully human. I'm just like you, but that's what happens. Right now, the thing is, I can do all those things, and I can kind of provide, remedies, if you like, for myself a lot quicker than I did years ago. The thing is that they still happen. Those lessons are still there to be learned. Right? So that's what you do as teachers. And the beautiful thing about this method is that the way that we prepare for teaching, the way that we start living our lives as practitioners, is what we're teaching. That's really quite nice. And when you stray and you come back to the principles of that, what do? When you're lost, you go slow. You break the big task down into something little. You start from where you know. And you go out a little bit into the unknown, come back to what you know. etc. So if you think about any of those sorts of dilemmas in life, that's what you do. And when someone really pulls the rug out from under your feet, if something horrible happens, somebody dies or whatever, as opposed to passing away. Yes, you may. Yeah. Yeah. And you. The microphone behind you. Oh. That's the talking spot. I chose to do the Carter series because it's hard for me.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
We would do it anyway. And we actually had it scheduled for October. But because we've swapped Jeff was going to be here now. He's now coming in October. So I've brought the Carter series back here. So it's you know, in some ways it's a little bit early to do it. But having said all this, now, are you all feeling alarmed because I keep telling you this is a hard series? No. Great, so I have no offer. Good. Because I didn't, you know, when I went home last night and reflecting on the day, I thought that's not what I intended. It's hard for me. You know, it's just one of those series that there's not a lot of, have you ever taught it in public? No, I haven't. And it is one that's, Feldenkrais himself, so the provenance of his provenance, you know, in terms of records, is that he taught it in San Francisco training. So that was the first Western professional training in San Francisco in the late 70s. So it's in the second year of San Francisco. That's where it sort of appears. Well, that's not true. It also appears at Alexander Yanai. There's a series called, you would never pick it, it's like knees and hands or something. And the middle one is absolutely the Carter, 365. So it's in Alexander Yanai. So he was using this stuff in the period of developing Alexander Yanai. So it's not, San Francisco is the first time it kind of appeared in the West, maybe. It's not in any of the sort of big public workshops that he taught. And it is very judo sort of in field, not gymnastic, but the organisation of it is really subtle. And as Zoran, I don't know if Zoran said it in public today, in the room, or just to me, last time I did it, Larry taught it downstairs. And my memory is that I still struggle with it. Zoran's memory is that Larry did this magical thing at the end and demonstrating on me and I could do it. I have no memory of that at all. Like I am persisting in being incompetent in this series, even though he has a memory that I somehow had some level of organisation in it. What is interesting about it, and we'll talk more about what I think, I'm still working with what I think what it looks like, and then the thing that I'm kind of, that I have in my favour is I have an aesthetic of what it looks like. And it is a weird kind of lesson where there is a sort of aesthetic at the end of it. But for some people, that might be a movement for a few centimetres, and for other people, they can go fully down to the floor and fully back up again. And that is quintessential Feldenkrais. And so for me, in this lesson, what is really important, and this is a fundamental lesson, is how do I learn to be satisfied with experimenting and exploring that kind of organisation for a few centimetres of movement, when other people around me can do 35 centimetres of movement. So that tells you the folly of measuring movement in range. But that's the folly that you have to deal with as ATM teachers, is that you will have students who want to go fully down to the floor and fully back up and bugger organisation because they want to do it. They want to do the 5 wings kata. And that's actually not what we're about. What we're about is being interested in how do I explore this process? Because the end result is actually kind of immaterial. Like your life will go on very happily, whether you can or can't do the 5 wings kata. What you will get in this is the process of how do I tackle something that is really difficult? How do I do that and maintain my sense of self and maintain my ground? So for me, I mean, I know the answer to my struggle already. That's my answer. But I have to keep recapitulating that learning process, because That's what we do as human beings, isn't it? You know, we struggle and we suffer and we learn how to deal with it. And that's what we're here, you know, that's what we're here for. That's what we're here for. So that's, but it's, you know, doing the 5 winds card is a really safe way to practice struggling in a very elegant way. I'm not saying I'm elegant. So, you know, in a way, there's nothing more to be said. That's it. You know, that's it. I was talking with Leah also about this ability to articulate. When some, you know, it's really interesting reading other training programs. You know, these synopses, they're very frustrating because they're literally telegraphic speech. But Dennis is having a conversation with the students about articulating the method. Now, I say it's a conversation, it's only 3 words. You have to extrapolate what he means by all this. But being able to articulate this word is what comes at the end of it. So if you are giving yourself a hard time because you can't talk about it, that's really, you're being really tough on yourself. Because, you know, you need years of having it under your belt, so to speak, for it to really flow in an articulate kind of manner. And he said, there's a great thing in here. He says, Gabby Yaron was, she was the queen of giving FIs. Her FIs are so simple and so beautiful. They just flow. Maybe we'll have a look at some of them later in the program. And Feldenkrais himself said she was like his idea of the perfect FI teacher. I didn't realise, and she was a trainer for us. We had her in segment 5, Ruth and I. I didn't ever pick that she wasn't particularly articulate. But Dennis says here she was not. She couldn't articulate the method very well at all. And this is interesting for you, Jenny. He said under the current criteria of becoming a trainer, she wouldn't become a trainer. But she was a master FI practitioner. And she was, as Ruth and I will tell you, a fantastic trainer because she did the method, she lived the method, she was the method, but she didn't articulate it very much. And, you know, I've been using her videos to do advanced training, and she just says the most sort of basic things, but they're the absolute kiss of the method. She doesn't have all the fancy articulateness that we're requiring you to do already. I'm just putting it out there as something that she was Israeli. That you know, her culture is, you know, she was pretty fast with words. She was very experiential. She was a musician by background. It wasn't, you know, she had no intellectual strengths, if you like. But as Dennis says in here, if you ask Feldenkrais, who would he send his mother to, which is his kind of template, you know, who's the best person, who would you send, you know, your most precious person, your mother, who would you send her to? He would say he would send her to. So, you know, just putting all these things in context. Yep. Living as, I'll say it for the living as a Feldenkrais. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it's becoming increasingly common, I think, that people recognise what we are on about as being really useful principles for life. And one of them is going slower. You know, you think about the whole slow movement. Because if you go fast, you don't notice stuff. And if you go slow, you notice stuff. So that would be one of the first things in life, is when I'm really speedy, I don't notice stuff. I leave my notes on the table here. It wasn't by being speedy that the ATM machine my card yesterday, but those sorts of things, you know, I'm not mindful. You know, in the current words, I'm not particularly enamored with the word mindful. Being full of mind to me sounds horrible, but anyway, if you've got a mind like mine, I want it to be empty, but full. But that would be the first example, is slowing down and noticing. And then from a Feldenkrais point of view, because that's my thing when I, you know, I've done quite a few presentations after the mindfulness movement people, and they do mindfulness for the sake of mindfulness. Whereas we train aware, and again, some practices we can be a bit arrogant, like we are the best. I'm sorry about that, but we do that. We pull that stuff a lot. Why I personally like our method is that when we are practicing awareness, it's awareness for something, and we have something in mind to be aware of, and we train ourselves to have something in mind, and that is to be. We have signposts that we are mindful and aware of, and characteristics of being that signpost us to be a better human being, to be a more mature human being. Seldom practices be a mature human being. So there's that aspect with awareness for something, not just being aware. Because I've got clients who are over aware, it's called hypervigilance. They are hyper aware, and it's a nightmare for them. So it's about being in control of the awareness and having it directed for a purpose, which is therefore the function. We have awareness for movement, and we have the functional integration. So those would be my top picks about the characteristics of what I've taken into my life around the method. And maybe when we have spare half hours, we'll give the microphone to Jenny and Bruce and to Zoran and say, how do you experience the method the most overtly in your life? So it's a really interesting question. And it's not to say, but still get very speedy and the wheels fall off, I can tell you, very quickly when I am a speedy person. So for me, the song class is a real challenge. And I am grateful every day that there's something happens in my life to slow me down. I probably told you that, the archetypal story, Raymond was saying, apparently I had mentioned I had a car accident. It was a long time ago. I was on the way to a cave, Frank Wildman. It was the second time, my second encounter with Seaus2, and I was speeding. I wasn't actually over the limit, but I was fast in my mind. I was already at the training. I was really classic, I was 22. I was always fast, and that's what happened. So I had this really profound experience that you have, and then go to a training program and having. So everyone will have a different story like that, and it'll be really interesting to hear a couple of stories from the others. And I constantly have to learn that lesson. And it's like we can do an ATM over and over again and still get something out of it. And that's what it's like, in this sort of quest to being a mature person, of applying these principles to live by them. I still have to go. It's not like, oh, I've got it now. Oh yeah, I know. Slow things down. I still have to go. But it shouldn't hit myself on the head. That's very disrespectful. I wouldn't do that full time. Trying to treat myself as nicely as I treat my clients. It's this ongoing learning, and knowing that you're not going to get there, that's the process. For me, again, being process-oriented is completely counter to me. I am so goal-oriented, it's unbelievable. So for me, to be teaching a process-oriented thing is the world's biggest challenge. Yeah. So this has really taught me to, give me a whole lot of other things like that. Yeah. There you go. So I feel like I've just had a little therapy session. I should pay you all. That's why we become trainers, so we can talk about ourselves. Let's talk about somebody else. I'm bored. Any other questions? That's the kata. Right? That's enough about the kata. And I'll keep talking about what I think is happening neurologically. Organizationally, it's complex. I'm going to talk 2 times. Yeah. 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 Going back to yesterday.
So going back to yesterday's lesson, what my struggle was to overcome was when I first started doing that moving backwards business.
Yep.
was actually the fear, the really fear of falling backwards.
Oh, that's interesting.
Came up.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to kind of just work in my head of my of how to get the organisation, so that I could actually get the organisation to remove the fear. That I could do it through organisation, not through falling. Yeah. So that was a really big one for me.
That's interesting. So this is what is fascinating about the work that you are taking on, is that you have no idea, you know, in the room what your students are exploring. And you have expectations of, you know, some mechanical ideas about what they're exploring, but I didn't see that in Gloria. So this internal lesson that she had, you know, embarked on herself is fantastic. Isn't that marvelous? You know, as the person's talking around the room, I have great faith in the students on the floor embarking on that process. Great, thanks. Yeah. You know, we can talk a lot about the fear of falling. You had the age group for your little scenario yesterday. That's a really very pragmatic thing that we can help people with. The fear of falling is so much lessened by giving people the competence in getting back up off the floor. You know, because they're frightened of getting down on the floor because they can't get back up. So that simple, pragmatic thing about getting back up off the floor is amazing. And my beautiful colleague in Adelaide, Margaret Mayer, who you haven't probably met yet, she has all her classes. She's the one I said yesterday. Her classes are in her house, and some of her classes are pretty much structured around her mother's coterie, and her mum is 92. So her friends are all, Jane goes to these classes. And these women and men in their 80s and 90s, they flock in and they're down on the floor and they're doing Alexander Yanai. And because Margaret is a powerhouse, she gives them the confidence to do it and the confidence to get back up. And, you know, what she, isn't it, Jane? It just is extraordinary what she's, how she's empowered. The work in her have empowered these people in their 90s. You get up and down off the floor and do Alexander Yanai. Yanai. The lesson series are really hard, you know. Well, you're not really hard. What am I saying that for? Who knows? But they're complex. Some of them are. You know, there's the sort of people that say, oh, you can't use Alexander Yanai with the public. They're go, what? Margaret Mayer with 90-year-olds. Like, come on. It's about, you know, she's very confident teacher. She knows exactly what she's doing. Yeah. Okay. And one more question, because otherwise I'll get complaints from 2/3 of the room that I'm talking too much. Maybe Chelsea, because you've had.
Hello.
Okay, you go.
Is this working? Yes. One comment. I was just thinking with Margaret Mayo, you get to learn your habits, because even, you know, some of the 90-year-olds are doing better than me, but even when she gives us something hard to do, she says, oh, we never wanted it to be, never expected it to be easy. And then she actually says something like, you get into your habits. And so you actually learn, I learn what I do by having something difficult. I don't learn necessarily how to do it, but I learn what my habits are when I've got something difficult to do. Like I clench my jaw and I stop breathing and all of these sort of things. So I started focusing more on what's difficult and what I do when it's difficult.
Yeah, that's an articulate way of saying what took me about 10 minutes to say. Right? Because it came right out of your experience. So do you see that actually if you want to cultivate being articulate about the work, and if you stay with your experience, that was really clear. You know what I mean? You know, that, because it was based in Jane's experience, and you can kind of relate to an experience like that. If I go off and talk in the theoretical way, I've lost most people. But if I root it in my experience that people can understand, that's actually all you need to be articulate. But we do get off on the theory stuff. And Dennis Leary is the worst in the world for it, actually. Bless him. You know, you read these synopses. He was such a brain, such a philosopher, you know, and then, you know, half an hour he bamboozled everybody. I still remember his talk on fractals. And everyone was just going, No, no. Yes, yeah. There's something in the name. It's a different Demis theory. So incredibly articulate bloke, and he could talk. You know, he would quote all these philosophers, and he'd go from the mathematicians, you know, with fractals and chaos theory, all the way through to, you know, Wittgenstein and blah blah blah. Had all of this stuff. It was fantastic. But who did he revere? Gabby Yarum, who wouldn't have known how to spell half those names. Who wouldn't have cared. Remember, she could. She probably knew them all, but she didn't talk about it. She talked about the method the way you just described. It was rooted in experience. Yes, I've been really enjoying the video. I think maybe we'll do that. I'll come back in July. We'll have a look at some of the FIs in July. They're fantastic, they are. I didn't have an FI with her, did you? But my friend Lynn did, who's a very exacting person. And we were watching it, and they look as simple as anything. They are profound. All right, line 4.